What is up, guys? Welcome to Pistons Talk Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great Sunday afternoon. Probably just got done watching the Detroit Lions play the Cleveland Browns. Wanted to have a podcast today, even if it is a little short one. There are a couple of topics that I did want to discuss with you guys. One of the first segments we'll be getting into today is young core rankings. BleacherReport.com had an article ranking the top 5 young cores across the NBA. We're going to be going over that and where the Detroit Pistons come in at their ranking. We'll be talking about Lauri Markkanen. A few weeks ago, Zach Lowe had mentioned some Lauri Markkanen teams that could possibly trade for him. We'll be getting into a Ringer article written over there. And then we'll end the podcast talking about media day a little bit. It does happen tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to be exact. So you'll be hearing from Trajan Langdon, JB Bickerstaff, and all the Detroit Pistons players. But let's get into today's episode. So our first topic in today's podcast is going to be a BleacherReport.com article. They decided to rank the best young cores ahead of the 25-26 season. There were 5 teams in total with this ranking. We're going to be going over very briefly of, just these 5 teams. I'm not going to spend too much time, talking about different teams because this is a Detroit Pistons podcast. But let's get into this first topic. So coming in at number 5 for them is the Orlando Magic. Now, when you look at Orlando, they do have some young pieces. You got Paolo Banchero, who is their first overall pick, Franz Wagner, who they got in the lottery, who's turned out very well for them, and Jalen Suggs, who was also a top pick for them. They have a lot of, Swiss Army knives. I didn't even mention Anthony Black, Jonathan Isaac. They have a very intriguing core, a lot of defensive-minded guys. They made a huge splash this year, trading for Desmond Bane. So I think a lot of people are going to have eyes on Orlando, and deservedly so. Like when they were healthy, they were one of the best teams in the East last year, but that was really early on in the season. Kind of wild that both Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner suffered the same injury, an oblique tear. But Orlando's going to be good if they can stay healthy. But they do come in at number 5 with this best young cores in the 25-26 season. Coming in at number 4, we have the Detroit Pistons. Now, me being a little biased here, you guys, because the rest of this list, I feel like there's a team in here that this shouldn't be in here, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the Pistons come in at number 4. Now, when you look at the Detroit Pistons core, they have several guys under the age of 25. K just turned 24 this week. You have Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren. You have guys like Marcus Sasser. You have a lot of young guys on this team. Jaden Ivey. Even Bleacher Report kind of goes into it. Cade, Asar, Ivey, Duren, Holland, Isaiah Stewart. I didn't even mention it because we just have so many young guys. It's kind of hard to just think of them all off the top of your head. But Pistons do come in at number 4 here. I think we all know how young this team is, how much young guys we have, and that's because from the 2020 season, all the way up to the 24 draft, or 24 draft, because we didn't have a first round draft pick this year. We were drafting in the top 5. We were making trades during the Troy Weaver era to acquire more talent. So the Pistons have a lot of young talent because they were going through the rebuild. Now it's time to decide what young pieces are here to stay and what young pieces could be possibly dangled in future trades, which we'll get into that in a little bit with the Lauri Markkanen and stuff. But Pistons do come in at number 4. I honestly think that they should be a little bit higher on this list, but maybe that's just my Piston fandom, my bias looking out. Number 3 on this list, we have the San Antonio Spurs. Now, San Antonio, obviously, having Victor Wembanyama is going to get you probably top 3 in a lot of lists just because of the talent that he is and the talent that he does have. Looks like he's fully healthy. He did suffer that thrombosis, that blood clot, but looks like he's going to be good to go this season, which is so good to hear. Pistons fans know that firsthand with Asar Thompson having a similar thrombosis, a similar blood clot situation. They can be really scary. Not a whole lot of updates, but sounds like, he's going to be 100% healthy, which is good for not only the NBA but the league, because I think Vic is just an incredible talent. If you guys haven't watched him or caught Spurs games, definitely encourage you to do so. He's a really fun basketball player. But they do have some young pieces on their team this year. They were very fortunate to get the second overall pick and get a Dylan Harper. They have Stefan Castle. They have De'Aaron Fox, who isn't really a young core player, but they have a lot of point guards, so it'll be interesting to see what they kind of do long term with all those guards. But, Wembanyama, Castle, Dylan Harper, Devin Vassell, I don't really think they should be at 3, but I think if you're just a national guy, you're not really a Detroit Pistons fan, you probably would have the Spurs in a top 3 just because of Vic and Dylan Harper. But hey, maybe that's just my Piston, fandom leaking out a little bit as I'm doing this podcast with you guys right now. But Spurs do come in at number 3. They do have some young guys, but they're mostly a pretty veteran-heavy team. Number 2, the Houston Rockets. And I kind of mentioned this at the top of the segment. I don't really think Houston is in the same conversation as young cores. Do they have young players on their team? Yes, Tari Eason, Sengun, Amen Thompson, Reed Shepard. They have young guys, but they also have Kevin Durant. They also have Steven Adams. They signed Dorian Finney-Smith. Out of all the young cores on this team, they're the oldest. When you look at average age, they have the oldest team out of this top 5 that Bleacher Report is mentioning. I just think, and this is just me, I think Houston is out of the, they have a bright future. They have a young core. They won 50 games last year. Obviously, the news to Fred VanVleet is devastating. I think that just brings more opportunities for Amen Thompson to run the show and more opportunities for Reed Shepard to possibly, get some playing time because he was only getting G League reps last year because Houston was that damn deep. But I don't really think Houston deserves to be in this, they're a young, fun team. They're a young core. I just don't see it. I get they have, young pieces that are in their starting lineup or off their bench that contribute, but I just don't really think they deserve to be in a list like this. I probably would have put Charlotte in a list like this. I would have put maybe even, Washington for that matter. And not as high as 2, but at least, being in a top 5 young cores going into the season. But obviously, Houston does come in at number 2, and if you guys could probably guess number 1, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder. No surprise there. They just won the NBA championship, and they're one of the youngest teams in the NBA still, which is just wild to think about. I think they have one guy on their roster that is 30 years old. It's just crazy. I mean, you have J-Dub, Jalen Williams. You have Chad Holmgren. SGA is not even 30 yet. I think he's only 27, which is just wild to think about. And I mentioned Cason Wallace. I mean, you just kind of look at their draft picks. They have so many young guys. Like Nikola Topic, who was a draft pick that they had, hasn't even played yet, and he's 21 years old. OKC has such a bright future. No surprise that they're coming in at 1. They're an actual young team that has young talent. Versus the Rockets, where they have a bunch of 30-year-olds on their roster. OKC has one 30-year-old on their roster. My only thing with this list is I think the Pistons should at least be in the top 3 conversation. I don't think Houston should be in this list whatsoever. I think there are other young teams that are in a rebuild phase that you could include. Like I mentioned, Charlotte. There's Washington. I mean, even Utah, even though they haven't won a whole lot of games, Utah has collected a lot of young talent on that roster. Now it's just, can they actually find pieces that they want to build around and find pieces that they feel they're going to be there more than their rookie contract? I really like Ace Bailey. Walker Kessler's an interesting piece. Big Keontae George fan over here. I was really high on Keontae George, but that's just my problem with this list. I don't think Houston deserves to be on it. But hey, man, that's just me. Maybe I'm a hater. I do want to kind of transition over to the next segment on this podcast, you guys. And it's the Lauri Markkanen talk. Now, I talked on the top of the podcast that there was a Ringer article And even Zach Lowe talked about it on his podcast. So we're going to be transitioning into the second topic of this podcast. So let's get to it. All right, the second topic of today's podcast is this Ringer.com article, and it says the biggest sleepers in the Lauri Markkanen sweepstakes. Now, before we kind of get into the Lauri Markkanen sweepstakes, I do want to discuss two things as it does pertain to the Detroit Pistons and future trade rumors. I just want to say the Pistons are going to be in probably several trade rumors for a couple of reasons. I'll go over both of those reasons right now. I think the first reason why you're going to see the Detroit Pistons and a lot of trade rumors, or just trade talks for that matter, is first and foremost, they don't have any more protections with their draft picks. If you guys remember when Troy Weaver was here, one of the first moves he made was acquiring Isaiah Stewart. And we drafted Isaiah Stewart. Happy Stu's here. But the Pistons couldn't trade first-round draft picks until draft night. There are no more protections on their draft picks. They own their draft picks. There's no top 13, top 14 protected. And now the Detroit Pistons can effectively use first-round draft capital in trade discussions with other NBA teams. That's the first thing. The second thing has to do with the team. What do I mean by that? The Pistons are a very young team. You know, outside of the vets like Tobias, Paul Reed, Duncan Robinson, Karis LeVert, you look at this roster from top to bottom, there's a lot of young talent on this roster. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is there could be players in trade rumors, like a Lauri Markkanen, for example, which we'll get into in a little bit, that teams want, that teams covet. Like, teams might covet a Jalen Duren. They might covet an Asar Thompson, a Ron Holland, a Jaden Ivey, and you have draft capital. You have more stackable contracts as well. You don't have guys that are, solely on rookie deals. Even the vets that you signed, $15, $16 million, you have the trade exception. Like you can get up to $30-40 million in trades very easily now because of the contracts that the Pistons have given out. So that's the reason I did want to touch on this before we get into this Lauri Markkanen section of this article. The Pistons can get up to those higher salaries and those higher price points now because the contracts that this front office has given out over the past two off seasons is setting themselves up to be a player for a guy like a Lauri Markkanen or a Zion Williamson or a Trey Murphy. Those are just some names I'm just, piling off the top of my head. Not saying that any of those guys are on the open market, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Like, the Pistons will be making a move, if I had to guess, at the trading deadline to upgrade this roster because you have a lot of young talent. Now it's time to see what happens when I get Cade another 20-point per game guy, right? You might have that with Jaden Ivey next to him. We're going to have to wait and see. But did want to touch on that for a couple of minutes. Let's get into this Ringer article mentioning the Detroit Pistons as a Lauri Markkanen sleeper. We're going to read a portion of this article as it does mention the Detroit Pistons, so let's get to it. It says a couple candidates spring to mind, but for one reason or another, they just don't seem able or willing to engage with Utah on realistic terms, be it thanks to their cap situation, dearth of assets, or lack of bone-deep self-confidence that's required to make a trade like this. I just want to say, first and foremost, he's 100% right. Like, when we talk about Lauri Markkanen or just their front office, it's Danny Ainge, and Danny Ainge is known to be very shrewd in deals, and it's a very good observation by this writer over at The Ringer. Just want to say that first and foremost. It says the center of the Venn diagram here is extremely slim, but I can still think of at least one team that should do whatever it takes to pry Markkanen out of Utah. It's the Detroit Pistons, an ascending, hungry, well-budgeted club that has probably spent the past 4 months convinced it let the New York Knicks off the hook in the first round. Okay, so I think we can all agree that the Detroit Pistons in that first round series with the Knicks, like, if they had Ivy, if they had Stewart, they probably go to the second round. Like, they're probably playing the Boston Celtics in the second round. Those games were just down to the wire. It was a possession by possession game. I really thought that they could have upset the Knicks if they were healthy. But hey, that's just me. But getting back to this article, kind of talking about how they felt like they could have beat the Knicks and they should try to pry Markkanen away from Utah. They go on to say, to start, Markkanen would be an ideal sidekick to enhance the next half decade of Cade Cunningham's career. He's an exemplary pick-and-roll partner who can drill movement threes and diversify Detroit's somewhat predictable attack. Markkanen has already thrived under J.B. Bickerstaff, a coach who helped turn his career around in Cleveland. And this is the type of player who makes perfect sense supporting a core that could really use a reliable spacing in the front court in NBA terms. It would be pretty much as mutually beneficial relationships can get. With an offer of Jaden Ivey, Tobias Harris expiring, and Bobby Klippman in 2 firsts be enough to please both sides. Danny Ainge is known for setting the price unreasonably high and then refusing to back away from it. But this feels like a win for him. The Jazz get more draft capital and a speedy, high upside 23-year-old, a building block to clarify their rebuild. Before he broke his leg last January, Ivey was averaging 17.6 points a game and shooting over 40% behind the three-point line. If he doesn't sign an extension over the next few weeks, he'll become a restricted free agent next summer. An outcome the Jazz should be fine with. Ivey won't be a franchise player who single-handedly makes them relevant, but he's a fascinating athlete who's closer in age to whomever Utah ends up drafting to be the guy. Okay, so there's a lot to dissect here with this. The first thing I did want to kind of discuss with this piece over at The Ringer. Now, they're not saying that the Detroit Pistons and the Utah Jazz are in trade rumors. They are just making an assumption, saying that, hey, I could see Detroit as a sleeper team trying to pry Markkanen away from the Jazz. That's the first thing. But I did mention I wanted to dissect what they wrote about as it does pertain to the Pistons. I think the first thing, what they said of, Markkanen and a Cade Cunningham duo would be beneficial. I agree there. From just a basketball standpoint, kind of just not even looking at the contract, like just, throwing it out the window right now. If you're talking about, like, what does this team need? It's a stretch four. It's someone that Cade Cunningham can pick and pop with. Not only would make Jalen Duren's life a lot easier, even Asar Thompson's life a lot easier. Having floor spacers out there opens up everything, not only for Cade, but everyone in the starting lineup. Lauri Markkanen can definitely do that. And he's been doing it for quite a long time. They also mentioned the J.B. Bickerstaff connection. Now, before Lauri even went to Cleveland, he was in Chicago. He was their draft pick. He was a lottery pick out of Arizona. And Chicago, I don't really think knew what to do with him, because Chicago was kind of in the mindset of like, hey, we're not fully committed to a rebuild, but we'll take you anyways and kind of just see what we could do with you. And he really didn't flourish until he got out of Chicago. He really didn't pop off until he got to Cleveland. And JB had him as a small forward. Some situations he would come off the bench. Other situations he would close out games for them. I think JB found a good mix for Lauri in Cleveland. So there is the JB Bickerstaff connection. Now, how much pull does JB have with Trajan in the front office? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure how Trajan wants to build this team long term. Right now, it's been a lot of 1-2 year deals, just kind of testing the waters to see what this team needs. I do think when you look at Lauri Markkanen as a basketball player, it does make sense. It does make sense to add a stretch four. It does make sense to add more shooting in the starting lineup next to Cade Cunningham. Now, I think where this is where the conversation is going to be debated. It was just kind of the asking price, because the asking price for Lauri is going to be incredibly high, like this writer did mention. Now, he did put just his opinion of what a trade could possibly be. Now, I actually think it would be higher, but He said Jaden Ivey, Tobias Harris, Bobby, and 2 first for Lauri. I personally think it's probably 3 first, just because of who Danny Ainge is. Jaden Ivey, I think there's a mixture with the fan base on him. Some people absolutely love him. Other people, they're like, he's okay, right? He is eligible for a contract extension. Pistons have to get an extension done with him before the season starts. Less than a month away. Don't really know if that's going to happen. And that's kind of what this guy wrote about, saying like, hey, if they don't get an extension done, he will be a restricted free agent going into next summer. And that's something that the Pistons may have to worry about of getting in these RFA contract extension talks. It's kind of weird. It's like, what do you do with the shooting guard position if you are trading Jaden Ivey? Like, do you upgrade Karis LeVert there? Do you throw Ron Holland in there? Do you go and sign one? Do you go and try to make a trade for somebody? I think that's where my head goes at immediately. But you do upgrade the front court next to Duren. You got a guy in Lauri Markkanen that is locked up for the next couple of years. He's on an incredibly huge contract. Did not take the hometown discount in Utah whatsoever. Why would he, right? But I think just from a basketball standpoint and a fit standpoint, he makes sense. I would probably be opposed to a trade for Markkanen, not because he doesn't fit. It's because who the GM is and the asking price that comes with Lauri. Jaden Ivey, Tobias, and 2 first, I think is a lot to trade for a guy that plays one side of the floor. Lauri Markkanen is not known the defender. If anything, he's actually a traffic cone defensively. He's really bad. And for his size, he doesn't really rebound the ball like I would like a 7-footer or 6'11" guy to do so. I think it's a lot to give up if you're Detroit and you're in a very unique situation right now where you just got your draft capital back. You have a situation to really just kind of landscape the market to see what you're looking for. I mentioned it might be a Lauri Markkanen. It might be a Zion. It could be a Trey Murphy. It could be another, young up-and-coming star that the Pistons feel that they have a chance to get. I just named those guys off the top of my head. I don't really know if they're, available to say, but I do think the Pistons will make a splash. I just don't know if it's going to be for Utah or Lauri Markkanen. Love Markkanen as a player, but I think that's a lot to give up for him. And I think Utah knows that where they're at in terms of their rebuild, they're still trying to find out who fits with Lauri Markkanen, who fits with all these guys. Like they drafted so many guards over the past few years. When I look at a trade offer like this, it's like, why would they want Jaden Ivey when they have like Keontae George? They just drafted Walton Clayton Jr. Like their rebuild it's almost similar to what Troy Weaver did, where he was just drafting talented guys and throwing at the wall to see if it sticks. See who actually, can stick around and can thrive under Will Hardy in Utah. But I don't really think the Pistons are going to dip their toe in the Lauri Markkanen business just because of the asking price and the draft capital. Like I don't really think you're going to trade 2 future first for a guy that plays one end of the floor. But that's just my opinion on it. The last part of the article kind of discussing about Jaden Ivey, that he's not really a franchise guy, but he's probably better than anything that they'll get in the lottery this year because, they're getting kind of the Pistons treatment. Like they got 5th this year. And they were one of the worst teams in basketball. They were getting fined for not playing their players. So, honestly, I don't really think the Detroit Pistons are going to entertain a trade like this. Knowing this front office, they want someone that can be impactful on both ends of the court, not just one side of the court. But hey, man, that's just me. I know there's the JB element of, using Lauri in creative ways in Cleveland, but I honestly think when we go into this season and we're looking at, expectations for our young guys, I think it would be a little bit premature to try to trade maybe a young promising piece in Jaden Ivey and 2 future first. for a guy that only plays one side of the court, and you get worse defensively, and then you have to kind of worry about like what you do with your starting shooting guard. I don't know, man. That's just my opinion. Maybe you guys think this is a good trade for a Lauri Markkanen. I personally don't, but let me know if you are watching live on YouTube or if you are an audio listener and you're listening back on the podcast side of this episode today. But did want to kind of wrap up this podcast and talk about Detroit Pistons Media Day, you guys. So the Detroit Pistons will have Media Day tomorrow. Now, I told you guys I tried to attend Media Day. I emailed PR and I never heard anything back. I wanted to go down there to get content for you guys. I thought it'd be a really cool opportunity, cool experience. Talked to some people that do work for the Pistons. They said, yeah, I don't see why not. You couldn't go, but I never heard back from their public relations department. No big deal. Maybe I can go next year. Maybe I can do some stuff with them in the future. But Media Day does start tomorrow at 10 a.m. You'll be hearing from Trajan Langdon, I think, first. Then you'll have JB Bickerstaff like around, 10:20, 10:30. And then throughout the day, you'll hear from Kay, Jaden Ivey, all the Pistons players, the guys that we signed to new contracts like Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson. So Media Day will definitely be a filled event. And then, we got preseason basketball, I think the 6th, I believe, against the Grizzlies. So basketball season is fastly approaching. We are going to be doing a podcast with Eric Vincent on Tuesday, kind of recapping Media Day. Just wanted to give you guys an update there. So on Tuesday, I'll be doing a podcast with Eric, and we'll be discussing Pistons Media Day. Just wanted to give you guys just kind of like a, FYI, Media Day is tomorrow, starts at 10 a.m. I'm not sure whether or not that this social team is going to be broadcasting it. They could be. They might just upload it on YouTube. But if you guys really want to, watch these interviews, a good follow for that is Eric. All these beat reporters here in the city, they'll probably be live tweeting during Media Day or posting interview clips. But wanted to give you guys this little PSA with that. Appreciate you guys, watching for the past 20 or so minutes. Did want to give you guys, a little podcast today because I know you guys do look forward to these podcasts. But we will see you guys on Tuesday. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. And as always, go Pistons. Peace.